Okay, so this now, new one, this is how we're going to go ahead and grade your final design projects. So this is a final design project from a student of a few years ago. Kind of a cool looking bike, carbon fiber disc in here, and in replacement for the wheel. That might actually reduce a little bit of the friction associated with it. But if you look over here in the Feature Manager, there's a lot of stuff in here. I mean, he did a really good job. So if you look at this, we have a major assembly over here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sub-assemblies within the assembly. A sub-assembly goes in there just like a part in a way. And of course, these sub-assemblies have parts. Parts have features. Features have sketches. And we're going to count all this stuff. So before this afternoon, I was counting just an average of some of these, an average of the features, average of the sketches. But the more I found it, you keep adding additional parts with features and sketches in there. And if the features and the sketches fell below average, it actually pulled this value down over here in a grade sheet. So this is the grade sheet. This is what we're going to be looking at. So if you look at the base grades, here are base grades. And what you want to do is go over here to the WDE FDS section in here. What I'm trying to do is make this as easy as I can, but as fair as I can too. And what I'm grading you on over here in these 4 columns over here are assemblies, parts, features, and sketch entities. And for week 5, these are the values you got. And for this week, for week 8's evaluation, we want to make sure we hit 30 points. So some of you are like 2/3 of the way there. You just need to add more stuff. You need to add more assemblies. If you want to do a sub-assembly, if you think it's appropriate, you can do that. Parts, you could add more parts to it, more features. And over here to the right-hand side are sketches. So I made it so you could actually see these over here. And this column over here is actually just a maximum. So if you exceed like maybe 36 over here, if we already actually put in for this person's part, he actually had 91 sketch elements in that one part. That actually bumps up quite a bit, so that makes that 36. Capping it off at 10%, so it's 33. So there's 6 parts. I only counted the first 6 parts in here, and he made there's a lot of sketch elements in here. And with 6 parts, he was actually able to get that score that we're trying to achieve for this week. With the 6 parts, each one of those parts had 8, 8, 8, 7, 6, and 10 features for each one of these parts. So that adds up, and then you have the columns over here. And then the parts actually over here added up to 3. There's a weighted value of 3, but there was actually 6 parts associated with that I actually counted. And then one assembly, he actually had 5 assemblies. I think there are 4 sub-assemblies and 1 master assembly, so we're going to put a value of 5 in there, and then that bumps up that value too. So you can see how that works. So let's go back to sketches and take a look at this, look at the sketches. What we do in here is we add up all the sketch entities in here all the way over to the right. If I need to add more columns in here, I can do that. So that sums everything in here, and then here's the weight. So the weight for sketches, there's a lot of sketch entities out there. When you're putting parts together, there's a lot more there than anything else. So I gave it a weight of 10%. So from 181, you get 18 points. And 8 to 18 points is about half of what the total is over here. So if we go over here to features, now we're looking at, this is a summation over here of all the features that we have in that one part, or all the parts in that one assembly. And then over here is a weighted value, so now the feature is about 1/3. So again, this makes up approximately, I don't know, maybe 40% of the total, whereas the sketches make up a little bit more than that. So maybe 60%, it's about 40%. It's got to be less than that because we have 2 other elements in here called parts and assemblies over here. So we have 6 parts, and that adds 3 points to it. So the weighted value for parts is going to be 0.5. And then over here for assemblies, you get credit for, you get 100% for each assembly. It's going to be a lot fewer assemblies than there are parts, features, and sketches. So it kind of goes down. Sketches, a lot more sketches. The weight's really small. As you can see over here, it's 10%. There's fewer features than sketches, but still more than parts and assemblies. So the weight over here is 0.3, 30%, and 50% for the parts, and then 100% for the assemblies. And these 4 columns over here add up all these pink columns that you see over here for parts, assemblies, features, and sketches. And then we add all those up together. That's what this dark red column is. Just add those together. And then ultimately you get a value of here of 40.20, or up here this person's got 21, this person's got 24. So a lot of your values, I don't think anybody goes too far below about half. So you just need to add more sketches, features, parts, and assemblies to your file, and this is how you do it. And if you want to change some of these values in here and see what you're going to get, only change the values in here in the light yellow columns. You don't want to change the values where there's formulas. So dark yellow is where the errors are, and these other pink columns over here are like summation or additive columns, and the orange column over here is a summation column too. So let's say you have a part in here, and instead of initially only had 2 sketch elements in here, but now you did a lot more work. You did 30 in here. Go ahead and watch how this value changes over here. So we're going to put in 30 in this one, and all of a sudden, yeah, that bumps up, so you get an extra 2 points for that. And you do Control Z because I want to have you guys see the original values in here. And we could do the same thing over here. Just add anything, just add additional stuff in here. Let's say you have more parts. Instead of 5, you have 6. And then now you can count your features, you can count your sketch elements, and then you can go from there. So there's your assemblies. Add more assemblies in here, and eventually makes your score a little bit higher. So now before Monday, you have an idea of what you need to do in order to get those values in there, in order to get those values elevated, so you get a decent grade for this week. And this is a column over here which kind of caps it at 10%. So this person's got 40 points over here, and we're capping it at 33, which is 10% more than 30, which is the total. So I'm going to go over in the next film segment and show you how I count parts, features, and assemblies. Okay, so we saw the grade sheet. Let's go ahead and count some parts in here. Let's go ahead and count all of our stuff in here that we have. We're counting stuff in here, not just parts, but sketches, features, parts, and assemblies. So over here, we might as well start at the very beginning. We have 1 assembly, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sub-assemblies, which makes 6 assemblies altogether. So let's go back to our grade sheet. And for assemblies, we're going to go ahead and add in 6. So we're going to use this column. We're going to type in 6 in here, and watch this number over here. It's going to go from 26.4 to, wow, all the way up to 31. So it actually adds quite a bit if you did that. Now, sub-assemblies need to make sense. Don't create sub-assemblies if they don't really need to be. But for this part, what we're doing is we're creating a sub-assembly of the wheel and the fork over here, sub-assembly of the handlebar items over here, and the same thing back here. So these sub-assemblies actually make sense. So those are the assemblies. How many parts do we have? Well, we're going to start. This is going to be your part number 1, the very first part in the top of the tree. We're going to count that as part number 1. We have a sub-assembly right away. But if that were a part, the real fork, we count that as a real fork. But the real number 2 part is going to be this body and a steerer, as you call it. I suspect it's probably a better word than that. But that's going to be the part number 2 and 3. And then in this other assembly, we have, looks like 1 part, 2 fasteners, and then another part. Fasteners are going to count as half. So, and then we're going to count those, and so on and so forth. So that's how parts are counted. And if we go back to the grade sheet and take a look at that, we have our parts over here. So ultimately, we're going to get down to the bottom of our assembly, and we're going to go ahead and count all the parts and put that here. So what's next? Next are features. So let's go back to our model and take a look at our features. So we're going to go ahead and dig in this a little bit. We're going to go ahead and maybe take a look at this one over here, our part number 1, number 2, our second part. Let's go ahead and open that up, and now we're going to count the features. We can count the features inside the feature manager tree, the assembly, but this is just as easy too. So we're going to start counting features. After the origin, we're only going to count planes as half, because they're used there as kind of reference geometry. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 planes. That makes 4 features. We're going to divide that by 2, and then we have a right blade, left blade as loft features, and so on and so forth. So that we have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. So we have 14 features for our part number 2. Now if we had a fillet in here, I'd count that fillet just once. If we had 5 fillets in there, I'd still count that fillet, or those fillets, as just 1 fillet. It's real easy to put a bunch of fillets in there thinking you're making progress in your part when you really should be adding more significant features. So with that said, we have again 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Kind of lost track of how many parts we actually counted. So here on this person's element over here, for his second part, we're going to type in 14 rather than 20, so it brings the score down a little bit, but it's almost at 30 as it is. Okay, the last thing we want to count are sketches. There are a lot more sketches in your assembly than you have anything else typically. And so we're going to take our part number 2 over here and begin to count the sketches. So we're going to start up here at the origin. Looks like we have a couple bits of reference geometry in here. Looks like we have a vertical line and then another line that goes off by 20 degrees, looks like 10 degrees. But anyways, we're going to go ahead and count that. So we have 2 lines in here. That makes 2 sketch elements and 2 dimensions. So that makes 4. I'm just going to go ahead and write that down and just count this as we go through our part. So some more reference geometry at the top of our tree. That's really good to have. Looks like 2 more items in there. Go ahead and write that down. Now we have some lofts in here which are driven by profiles. Should be labeled. But anyways, we have a sketch 7, sketch 1, sketch 1, and sketch 7 again. And then we're doing sketch 1 3 times. So we're only going to count sketch 1 once. We're not going to count that 3 different times, even though it appears 3 different times. So sketch 7 looks like 2 ellipses, center line, and then we have dimensions. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Write that down. And then sketch number 1 has got something similar on the top. We have 1 extra line in here, so that makes 4, 5, 6 with the dimensions. We're going to write that down too, because I'm going to lose track. And then sketch 8 has got our guide curves, 1 dimension, and then 2 guide curves in there. Looks like 3 elements altogether. So now we're not going to count sketch 1 and 7 over here in this feature. We're going to count the guide curves, which is going to be 3 more. And then down here for sketch 2, where we have some more elements in here. It looks like 3 more curves in here, and that adds to the total so far. So those curves didn't have any dimensions on it, so it must have relied on existing geometry. So moving along, our shell feature doesn't have any sketches associated with this. So now we have sketch 12. There's 2 more. There's 2 more there, so that makes 4 more. And it looks like a short line in here to connect those 2, so that makes 5. And then 6 with that one, so we're going to write that down. And so on and so forth. So that's how we do it. We just go from the top to the bottom, and we just add these together. So there's 1 loft profile, 2nd loft profile, 2 each makes 4. Another line, that makes 5. Another line over there for a guide curve makes 6. We're going to put that together, and then so on and so forth. So this one's on the bottom. 1, 2, looks like for that. And then let's see what else we have in here. That looks like it's something similar. Look at using the same sketch. Not going to count that. And then finally sketch 19 down here. 1, 2. So with the ellipse there's 1. Then there's 2 with those 2 vertical lines and arc on top. That's 3, 4, 1 on the bottom. That makes 5. 2 dimensions makes 6 and 7. So if we add all that together, I'm not going to waste video time for that, but it looks like it's about maybe 25 sketch elements in there. Then we go back to our table and we make our corrections. So that's part number 2, and this one we're going to put in 25. So you can see what that is. It bumped up the score up to over 30. Didn't quite cap it at 33 yet, but now we're making progress here. So that's how you do it. Whenever you make changes in here, whenever you want to see what you can do in order to boost your score, go over here to light yellow elements over here, this section over here, and add it in for sketches, features, parts, and assemblies. Okay, the last thing, actually, this is the last thing. Last thing you need to consider here are errors. So if you're looking at each one of these elements, these are kind of, it gives you guidance of what I'm looking for. I say over here, there's a sketch picture. If you have one, it's going to be worth 10 sketch entities. External sketch relations count like a dimension. And errors and underdefined sketches don't count. You got to keep that in mind. If I see an underdefined sketch, I just go to the next one. So you got to be careful about that. Sketch pattern elements get counted as 3 sketch items, whole wizard, whole locations, and threads. Those get counted too in a special way. So features over here, now we have a column over here which allows us to take off some points. And the points I'm taking off over here are going to be 10% if and the only thing I can find right now are features that are not renamed. You want to make sure you rename those. And it's going to be based on parts. So something else to consider about features in regard to what I'm going to be counting. Error features don't count, just kind of like sketches that are underdefined. If there's errors in here, I'm going to just pass over it, not going to count it, make sure it's correct. Fillets and chamfers count only once, as I mentioned before. Planes and axes count as half a feature, as long as they're part of the model. So let's say we wanted, let's say all 20 or all 6 of this person's features or parts. None of them are renamed, so I'm going to go ahead and type in 6 in here, and what it's going to do is going to take 10% off the 15.9. So that means if I type in 6 in here, it's going to take 10% of the 15.9, give us a value of 4.3. It'll take 5% off if I type in 3, so that means 3 parts are affected by that. So if I see a part that's like half named, and let's say I have all 6 parts are only half named, that would still count as 3. So I'm not going to ding you for all 6 parts, but kind of like the bulk of it, if it's half for each one of those 6 parts, then it's equivalent to about 3, and I'll put in that value in there. So something very similar for parts too. I'm looking for parts, only the additional features and sketches or similar parts or configurations will count. So if you're creating like a tire on some tire looks similar on another item as a different part, if you're only doing is if the only thing you're doing is adding like one different additional feature to that tire, then you only get counted, you only get credit for that one additional feature and not for that whole tire. So keep that in mind. Configurations count as half a part, and fasteners count as a half a part up to a certain limit. So you want to make sure you don't just create a bunch of holes and put a bunch of fasteners in there just to add fasteners. And then you're going to get 10% off for not having descriptive part names. I don't want to see part names that say final 1 or final 2. Tell me it's a tire, tell me it's a wheel. That would be better. I want to make sure that all the parts are defined. There's materials for everything. Make sure you define that. And if it's not properly oriented, if I'm looking at a flashlight and it's supposed to be the front of the flashlight with a lens and a bulb bar, but it's not the front, that's not properly oriented. So I want to make sure you have that on the right planes. And it needs to be symmetric from one side to the other, and if it's not, you get points off for that too. So kind of the stuff we've been grading on throughout the quarter. And again, the same thing, it's going to be based on parts. So if I find over here that maybe 4 parts didn't really comply with a lot of that stuff, didn't have materials defined in it, didn't have descriptive part names, then it's going to take values off of that weight. So same thing over here with assemblies. I'm looking for if it's not fully defined when it should be. When you have intersecting parts are like within other parts. Instead of having a mating surface, I'm going to take points off for that too. And if you have other assembly errors, points get taken off for that too. So ultimately, once you get these points taken off and added and put together, these are the 4 columns it's looking for. This column over here for the sketches, this column here, the dark pink, that dark pink, all are, it's just looking over there, and there's it's just going over to that column over there and taking a look at that. So, that actually should be here, not there. So we're going to move that over, and then I'm going to go ahead and copy that up and down and make sure that gets included. But essentially, like with this one's going to be over here. That one's going to be, not there, over here. So let's go ahead and get that corrected over here. And again, we're going to copy that up. Copy this one up, just so I don't lose track of that. Copy that one down. I'm going to format those cells here in a bit. And then finally, this one over here is going to count all the sketch elements in there. So once those things are added up, this is the ultimate, almost the ultimate summation here. So it's going to add up all 4 of those columns, and then it's going to give you a score of 13.9 over here for this student. For this student over here, which has a lot more stuff, it's going to be 30.9. And then if it goes over that value over here, up to 33, it's going to be capped at 110%. So this is the score I'm going to be looking for in week number 8. These are the scores that are current as of week number 5. So this is what I've seen lately on your final design project. As I added up all those together, this is what you have currently on week number 5. Now, 2.5 more weeks have already passed since week 5, so I'm certain you've done more work on this. And you might already be up to 30, which is good. So keep in mind, we're looking for 30 over here, 33 max if you go over 30. And then we will see you on Monday.